They are literally mushrooms with no faces and just the outline of a woman's body. I couldn't look at a mushroom the same way for weeks. Hi guys, I'm Triya, and today we are diving into something a little bit different. I'm going to talk about the popular books that I read in 2024 that I did not like. Right, let's get into it. The first book I want to talk about is The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides. Now this book was released in 1993, but recently it's been all over TikTok, or at least it was in the last few years, and I've been meaning to read it for a while. If you're not aware, the book is set in 1970s suburban America, and it's about these 5 young sisters from the Lisbon family who end up killing themselves. And the book is from the point of view of these young neighborhood boys who are watching the sisters, and they recount their obsession and fascination with these girls and their deaths. Now, I know that this is a beloved book and I've seen a lot of people rave about it, but I did not like it at all. And what frustrated me the most was the very thing that most people seem to like about the book, and that is the male gaze. Now, I am just so sick of the male gaze. Instead of feeling like an authentic exploration of these young boys' minds, it just felt like an outlet for the author's own obsessions with the idea of these virginal, manic pixie dream girl type of characters. To me, this whole book just felt like a way to play out the sexual fantasies of the author himself. This whole book felt so voyeuristic, and instead of being in a way that is critical of the male gaze, it just seemed to revel in it. The sisters in the story are never given any agency. They are literally reduced to objects of these boys' fantasies. So I couldn't help but compare the novel to Vladimir Nabokov's Lolita, which is actually a book that I really enjoyed, so much so that it made it onto my top 10 books of all time video. Now, Lolita is a deeply uncomfortable read, but at least it's purposeful. Nabokov, through the book, forces the readers to feel disgust and confront the horrors of Humbert, the main protagonist's actions. Lolita is written to disgust you, whereas The Virgin Suicides didn't feel like it had that critical intent. I know this is a controversial opinion, and I'd love to hear if you feel differently about the book, but for me it was a frustrating and uncomfortable read that I will not be revisiting. So the next book I want to talk about is called The Beauty by Aliya Whiteley. Here's the basic premise. It's a dystopian novel set in a world where women have mysteriously died out. Soon, these strange mushroom-like creatures begin to grow from the graves of the dead women. And this is where things get weird. So the men in the story start to view these mushroom creatures as replacement for women. I'm sorry to say it, but I hated this book. And what's really annoying is that I was so excited by the premise. This book markets itself as a feminist novel, but in fact, I think it's deeply misogynistic. For starters, the women are reduced to literal sexual objects. Their humanities, their personalities, everything is stripped away, and they become these faceless mushroom creatures that exist solely to serve the men, as their sexual partners, as their cooks, their cleaners, and basically their mothers. They are literally mushrooms with no faces and just the outline of a woman's body. And no, it's not a scathing criticism of the patriarchy, at least not one that lands. I powered through to the end because I don't like leaving books unfinished, but honestly I regretted it so much. It just felt like it was a waste of my time, and I couldn't look at a mushroom the same way for weeks. So next I want to talk about a book that had a lot of hype around its release, and it came out last year. It's called The List by Yomi Adegoke. So the book is about these young, successful black people living in London called Ola and Michael, and they start out as this perfect modern couple, and their world is shaken when, just weeks before their wedding, Michael's name appears on this anonymously curated list of men accused of assault and sexual misconduct. The book explores the fallout of this revelation. I really thought I would like it, and that's what makes it hurt even more. And although it is a page turner, I felt like the overarching message of the book was to shed light on the dangers of false accusations of assault and rape that men face. And it just seemed like a sort of sob story about how this man's life was ruined. In the world that we live in, it's dangerous to give this much focus to the dangers of false accusations, especially in a world where false accusations get as much, if not more, attention in the press than actual cases of assault. It is true that black men are disproportionately more likely than white men to be falsely accused of assault, but in reality, the numbers of false accusations of sexual assault, for example, are vanishingly low, and the number of actual convictions for false accusations are 0. This is where I feel like this novel was just a failure. And also, I think it's important to mention that Michael wasn't accused of sexual assault, but rather he was accused of physical assault. Maybe there wouldn't have been a discussion at all or any material for a book if he was accused of rape, for example. But also I feel like the author was maybe too scared to make the book about sexual assault. I won't give away what happens in the end, but there's this supposed twist in the tale that's supposed to make everything better, but I feel like it was just this weak band-aid fix-it-all that didn't do enough to justify how much muddying of the waters there was regarding false accusations throughout the whole book. And I feel like this book didn't add anything valuable to the conversation. On a similar theme, the next book is one that I thought I would love, but ended up not liking. And this book is I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel. So this story follows this unnamed female protagonist who is in a relationship with this older married man who's charismatic and manipulative and a serial adulterer. And this unnamed protagonist is not white. And she becomes obsessed with him, not only him, but also this girlfriend that he's seeing. Now, I really wanted to love this book, but honestly, I just didn't feel excited to get through it. It felt like I was trudging through, like it wasn't an exciting read, even though the premise is so exciting. Sure, there were some moments that stood out. The chapters are really short, and some of them really capture the feelings of pop people navigating the dating world in a white majority society. However, overall, it just felt underwhelming. To be honest, I don't think that the author or the protagonist takes the obsession far enough for it to become truly exciting. And although the novel builds up, it doesn't reach that peak of intensity that you would expect and that would be required to make this story memorable. The next book I want to talk about is Breasts and Eggs by Mieko Kawakami. So the book is divided into two parts. So the first part follows this character called Natsuko, who is a struggling writer in Tokyo, and she reconnects with her sister Makiko and her niece Midoriko. Makiko is considering breast enhancement surgery, and Midoriko is grappling with the changes that come with puberty. The second part of the novel shifts the focus to Natsuko's own journey as she contemplates having a child through artificial insemination. This book should have been right up my alley, and I started reading this book when I was in Japan last year, which was so great, and it made the setting feel so immersive. But despite all that, I was surprised by how much I didn't like the book. The pacing was a big issue for me. It felt so slow. There were moments where the story started to pick up and I was like, okay, this is it. But those moments were too few and far between, unfortunately. I think this is one of those books where I appreciated the ideas more than the actual experience of reading it. The final book that I read this year that I want to talk about is It Ends With Us by Coleen Hoover. So this was the first Hoover book that I read, and I'm definitely really late to the game. I'm sure you know what this book is about, but essentially it's about this young woman called Lily who falls in love with a neurosurgeon called Ryle. As their relationship deepens, Ryle's abusive tendencies emerge, which forces Lily to confront her past and the domestic violence that occurred in her own family. I really wanted to read it just because there's so much discourse about the book online. And I'm not about jumping on the train of hating on a female author for being successful, but I do have some criticisms. Firstly, I think this book is a bit heavy-handed when it compares the domestic violence and abuse that happens between Lily and Ryle and Lily's parents. The story relies so much on telling rather than showing, which I think is just lazy writing. It's though the author doesn't really trust the readers to be able to pick up on the parallels, even though they're so obvious. And also, I have to talk about this one scene between Lily and Ryle, which involves a stethoscope, and because Ryle's a doctor and that's supposed to be sexy. If you've read the book, then you know what I'm talking about. I am a doctor and I just found that scene so cringe. Maybe it's because I see stethoscopes every day for work, but it just felt so awkward. Now, don't get me wrong, I think stories about domestic violence are really important, but this one felt like it trivialized domestic violence at times. So I know that this book resonates with a lot of people, and I can see why, but for me, it just didn't hit the right notes. So there you have it. Those are some popular books that I read in 2024 that I just didn't like. I'd love to hear what you thought. Have you read any of these? What do you think? Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.